She vanished from her own home. The truth was hiding just feet away. Red and blue lights sliced through the Ohio night, washing over quiet houses that never expected police tape. An officer steps carefully through wet grass. Another clicks on a flashlight. The beam cuts across a backyard shed. Ordinary. Small. Easy to ignore. Inside the house, her phone keeps buzzing. Messages pile up. No replies. She wouldn't just leave, a voice says, low, certain. A friend. A sister. Someone who knows her patterns, her habits, her fears. Christopher Morrison stands off to the side, arms crossed. He tells police she needed space. Says they argued. Says she walked out. His words land flat, rehearsed. An officer watches him longer than necessary. Days pass. The air grows heavier. Neighbors whisper. Detectives return. A warrant. A lock forced open. The shed door creaks. One officer freezes. Another swears under his breath. Plastic bags. A smell that answers every question at once. She's here, someone says, barely audible. The camera lingers on the doorway as Christopher is led away, his face pale, eyes hollow. Later, he will tell someone the truth, as if confession might lighten the weight. It won't. The title fades in slowly, stark against the darkness. This was never a disappearance. It was a secret, buried in plain sight. Morning comes quietly, the way it always does. Tiffany wakes before the alarm, slips out of bed, and pads across the floor without turning on the light. She moves on habit alone. Coffee first. Phone second. A quick glance at the time. She is the kind of person who answers messages right away, who hates leaving people waiting. That detail will matter later. Her life is ordinary in the best way. A small home. Familiar roads. The same grocery store clerk who nods without asking how she is because the answer never changes. Fine. Busy. Tired but steady. Her marriage has rough edges, the kind she tells herself every couple has. Arguments that start small and end with silence. Doors closed a little harder than necessary. Still, she shows up. She always does. That day, nothing announces itself as the last. No dramatic goodbye. No packed bag. No warning text. She runs an errand. Says she will be back. The door closes behind her with a soft click. Hours pass. By afternoon, the quiet feels wrong. Her phone lights up on the kitchen counter. One message. Then another. Then several. No response. A friend jokes at first. She probably lost her charger. But the joke doesn't land. Tiffany never lets her battery die. Never disappears without a word. By evening, concern hardens into something sharper. Someone tries calling. Straight to voicemail. Another friend checks social media. No posts. No likes. No signs she has been online at all. That is when the unease settles in, heavy and cold. She would have called, her sister says, staring at the screen like it might blink back to life. She always calls. Christopher says they argued. Says Tiffany needed air. Says she walked out. He says it casually, too casually, like he has rehearsed the sentence in his head. She just needed space, he tells them, eyes fixed on a point over their shoulders. She'll come back. But night comes, and she does not. Her car is still there. Her keys are still inside. Her jacket hangs where she left it. All the things someone would take if they meant to leave are right where they belong. The phone buzzes again. This time it is her mother. Then her sister. Then a friend who has stopped trying to sound calm. The silence stretches until it feels intentional, almost loud. A neighbor mentions seeing the porch light on late. Another says they heard voices, maybe an argument, maybe just the television. Nothing solid. Nothing useful. Just fragments that refuse to connect. Christopher grows irritated. "You're overreacting," he says. "She does this sometimes. No one remembers her ever doing this before." When police are finally called, the question sounds almost ridiculous in its simplicity. An officer asks, "When was the last time you saw her?" Christopher hesitates. "Just a beat too long." "Yesterday," he says. Outside, the house sits calm and unchanged. Inside, Tiffany's life is frozen mid-motion. Coffee cup in the sink. Shoes by the door. A phone still lighting up with messages she will never read. Somewhere between nightfall and the arrival of flashing lights, the question becomes unavoidable. How does someone disappear without a trace from their own life? Christopher Morrison sits in the living room, leaning back in a chair that looks too big for him. His hands are folded loosely in his lap, but his eyes are alert, darting to the corners of the room. He tells the officers calmly, almost rehearsed, that Tiffany needed some air after their argument earlier that day. "She just needed a little space," he says, voice steady, too steady. His tone is measured, lacking the frantic edge one might expect from a husband whose wife has vanished. A neighbor, pressed against the window across the street, watches as Christopher moves slowly around the house. He lights a cigarette, puffs once, then flicks the ash into the grass. The casualness unsettles the observer. In the kitchen, police note small details: the coffee cup still warm, a chair pulled out slightly, shoes by the door exactly where Tiffany left them. Nothing is amiss except for him. When asked about her last movements, Christopher hesitates. Just a fraction of a second too long. He repeats phrases: "She said she'd be back, I thought she went to the store." Each time, his words feel like placeholders, not answers. Detectives exchange glances, jotting notes. The narrative he provides has gaps they cannot ignore. Outside, the evening air carries faint whispers of activity, neighbors talk, a distant dog barks. But Christopher remains composed, arms crossed now, jaw tight, eyes flicking to the driveway as if expecting something to appear. He laughs softly at a police remark, almost nervously, as though testing the room. His laughter does not reach his eyes. Detectives review the timeline. Phone pings, last messages, security footage, it all points back to this house. Suspicion begins to crystallize. The calm demeanor, the careful pacing, the rehearsed explanations, they are clues hidden in plain sight. Hours stretch, tension thickening. Each gesture Christopher makes is examined under a microscope. Each officer beside him senses the disconnect between the fear expected and the control displayed. Every glance, every pause, every word seems calculated. The man left behind is no longer merely a husband in grief, he is now the focus of the investigation. And as the night settles over the quiet Ohio street, the question begins to sharpen: how much does he know? How much did he plan? Law enforcement is closing in, and the cracks in his story are widening, revealing the first glimmers of the truth. The sun had set, and shadows crept across the Morrison property. Police cruisers lined the quiet Ohio street, lights casting shifting reds and blues over trimmed lawns. Detective Harper stepped from his vehicle, notebook in hand, scanning the exterior of the house with trained eyes. "We're retracing her last known movements," he said, voice low but deliberate, almost to himself. His partner, Detective Lawson, nodded, eyes narrowing at the faint glow of the porch light. "Call logs, security footage, witnesses, we need everything before we move in," she replied, scrolling through a tablet, tension tightening her shoulders. Inside the house, phone records were laid across the kitchen table. Each ping, each missed call, each unreturned message stitched together a timeline that grew increasingly strange. Tiffany's errands, her brief stops at the store, the route she took home, all verified, all mundane, except for the last few minutes. Somewhere in that ordinary stretch, the thread unraveled. Neighbors whispered their recollections, a door closing, the faint echo of raised voices, a car door shutting, maybe. Nothing concrete. The detectives listened, jotting notes, eyes flicking to the backyard. The shed sat at the far edge of the property. Weathered wood, paint peeling in long strips, ordinary in every sense, but its quietness gnawed at them. Nothing in there yet, Lawson murmured, crouching to examine the ground around it. Footprints in the soft soil. Nothing else. Harper's flashlight cut a beam along the walls of the shed, bouncing off nails and hinges. He paused, hand hovering near his radio. "We'll need a warrant before we touch anything," he said. "But this is where we start." Christopher Morrison appeared in the doorway, leaning slightly, arms folded, watching the detectives like a shadow. His expression was calm, almost expectant, eyes fixed on the shed. "You'll find her," he said softly, voice flat. "Or maybe you won't." The tension in the yard was almost tangible. Every movement, every sound felt magnified, the creak of the swing in the yard, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of a car engine. Detectives adjusted gloves, checked their flashlights, each step calculated. They had the timeline, the witness statements, the phone logs, and the unshakable feeling that the ordinary shed might hold extraordinary secrets. They paused at the threshold, breathing shallow, anticipation coiling tightly. Harper looked at Lawson. "Ready?" he whispered. She nodded, grip firm on the door handle. The camera cuts to darkness, shadows stretching across the shed. The next moment promises revelation, but for now, the secret stays hidden, almost daring them to enter. The quiet stretches on, suffocating, a prelude to truth lurking just beyond the frame. The detectives stepped carefully across the damp grass behind the Morrison property. The shed loomed at the edge of the backyard, ordinary in every sense, weathered wood, peeling paint, a simple lock rusted at the hinges. The quiet of the evening pressed down, heavy, unnatural. Detective Harper crouched, gloves snapping into place, flashlight cutting a swath of pale light across the door. "On my mark," he whispered. Detective Lawson mirrored him, eyes tight, breath steady, but her fingers betrayed her tension with subtle twitches on the handle of her flashlight. Christopher Morrison watched from the porch, arms crossed, jaw tight, expression unreadable. His pale eyes tracked every movement, lips pressed flat. "Do you really think you'll find anything?" he asked softly, almost casual, but there was a hint of challenge in his tone. Harper didn't respond. The shed door creaked under the weight of careful inspection, hinges groaning. A dim interior revealed old gardening tools, a stack of plastic bins, the smell of damp earth. At first, nothing seemed amiss. Then Harper's flashlight caught movement in a corner, near the back wall. A folded blanket, tucked in a way that suggested concealment. Harper knelt, peeling it back slowly. The officers froze, a breath suspended in the night. There, concealed from the casual eye, lay Tiffany Morrison. Her face pale, features serene yet lifeless. Detective Lawson stepped back, hand over her mouth, eyes wide with disbelief. Christopher's calm shifted subtly, a twitch of the jaw, an almost imperceptible tightening of the hands. I don't understand," he murmured, voice cracking. Not a question to the detectives. A whisper to himself. The scene stretched on in silence. Evidence bags were drawn, photographs taken, every angle documented meticulously. The body bore signs of an attempt to hide the crime, blankets, boxes shifted, footprints leading nowhere. Every small detail whispered of planning, of intention. At the morgue, the autopsy confirmed what the officers had feared, cause of death, a single gunshot wound to the chest. Time of death estimated just hours after she had vanished from the house. There were attempts to clean, to erase evidence, but forensic teams noted inconsistencies, fingerprints smudged, blood traces partially concealed, small scratches suggesting a struggle. Detective Harper leaned against the wall outside the autopsy room, eyes fixed on the case files. "This isn't a missing person case anymore," he said quietly. Lawson nodded, expression taut. "This is murder," she replied, voice low but firm. The tone shifted, palpable in every corner of Liverpool Township. The narrative of a woman disappearing had ended. What remained was a crime, deliberate and chilling, carried out in the shadows of what had once seemed ordinary. Neighbors whispered, their gazes lingering on the Morrison house. A home that had looked quiet and normal now carried a weight, a presence of horror. And somewhere, Christopher Morrison's composure remained, a thin veneer over something darker. The night settled over the backyard shed, now cordoned with tape, lights from police vehicles reflecting across the grass. The ordinary had been pierced. The truth was visible now, stark and unforgiving. Murder had arrived, and nothing would ever make the neighborhood feel safe again. Christopher sat on the edge of the living room couch, the dim light from the porch casting long shadows across the walls. His hands trembled slightly as he lit a cigarette, the glow briefly illuminating his pale, tense face. Across from him, Mark, his longtime friend, mid-30s, white, medium build, short brown hair, wearing a casual gray sweater, leaned forward, eyebrows furrowed, eyes searching. "Chris, you need to tell me what happened," Mark said quietly, voice firm but laced with concern. Christopher exhaled slowly, smoke curling in the dim air, his gaze fixed on the floor. It just got out of control," he admitted, voice low, almost strangled. His jaw tightened, lips pressing together, eyes darting toward the window where the blue and red lights of police vehicles faintly glimmered in the distance. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he whispered, the weight of realization settling over him. Mark remained still, hands clenched together, leaning closer, urging him to continue without pressuring him. I shot her," Christopher said finally, the words hanging in the room like a physical presence. His shoulders slumped, the tension in his frame giving way to something heavier, resignation. "I thought I could fix it. I tried to hide her, the shed," his voice faltered, choked by emotion, eyes moist, pale skin almost ghostly in the porch light. Mark's face tightened, shock and fear flashing across his features, but he stayed silent, letting the confession continue. The words were not said to law enforcement, but to someone he trusted, someone who had known him for years. Yet in that informal circle, every detail he revealed, his own admissions, his hesitations, his body language, became evidence. Mark's expression shifted from fear to a calculated clarity, realizing the magnitude of what he had just heard. Outside, the investigation had already been moving faster than Christopher could anticipate. Detectives prepared paperwork, warrants drawn, officers briefing one another on timelines and inconsistencies. By the time Christopher hung up with Mark, flashing blue lights were already moving toward the Morrison house, a sense of inevitability closing in. When the knock came on the door, Christopher froze. His pulse raced, hands trembling, lips pressed tight. The officers outside identified themselves, voices firm but controlled. Harper and Lawson had every piece in place, the timeline, the shed, the evidence, and now, corroboration of his own admissions through the third party. Christopher stepped toward the door, voice shaking, the weight of guilt pressing him down. I need to come with you," he asked, more a question to himself than to the officers. Detectives Harper and Lawson exchanged a glance, then gently but firmly guided him toward the cruiser. The realization of the full consequences of his actions had arrived. Every hesitation, every attempt to hide the truth, every calm facade he had maintained now crumbled. The confessions outside official channels had provided the last piece of the puzzle. Neighbors watched from a distance as Christopher was led away, pale and subdued. What had started as a missing person case ended in a quiet, inevitable reckoning. The ordinary house in Liverpool Township had become the stage for a confession, the point at which deception met law, and the truth finally emerged. The night air was heavy, thick with anticipation, as the officers guided him down the porch steps. His hands were restrained, fingers trembling, dark hoodie hanging loosely over his slumped frame. The blue and red lights of the police cruisers reflected across the wet pavement, bouncing off nearby houses, and casting long, fractured shadows. His jaw was tight, lips pressed thin, eyes darting momentarily at each officer as if seeking a lifeline in the darkness. "Step carefully," one officer murmured, voice calm but firm. He didn't respond, his gaze fixed on the ground, posture rigid, shoulders tense. Every footstep seemed to echo in the quiet neighborhood, a rhythm punctuated by the soft hum of engines and distant wind rustling through trees. Detectives moved alongside, notebooks and evidence folders tucked under arms, ready to document the arrest with meticulous care. Once inside the cruiser, the handcuffs clicked into place, a small, mechanical sound that seemed louder than it should be. The officers' faces were neutral, trained, yet the tension between the flashing lights and the silence of the night painted a psychological landscape heavier than the cool Ohio air. The ride was short, almost oppressive, each stoplight amplifying the realization of inevitability. At the precinct, the formalities began. A uniformed officer read the charges aloud, voice firm and deliberate. Aggravated murder, the words reverberated against the sterile walls. Tampering with evidence. Abuse of a corpse. Each phrase landed like a hammer, reshaping the narrative from chaos to law. He shifted in his seat, pale skin contrasting with the stark lighting, hands still trembling, eyes narrowing as the words sank in. The prosecutor's presence added another layer of weight. She outlined the motive carefully, articulating the psychological undercurrent of the crime. Control. Fear of separation. Possession. It had not been a crime of passion, she explained, but a calculated act meant to assert dominance over someone who had been close. Her voice was steady, authoritative, each word building the framework of an inevitable conviction. The accused remained quiet, gaze averted, the slow tightening of his jaw betraying internal reckoning. Detectives Harper and Lawson observed from the perimeter, exchanging glances. Evidence had been collected, testimonies secured, phone records verified. The confession, though informal, had been corroborated by witnesses, leaving little room for ambiguity. The charges were formal, but the weight of accumulated truth pressed in from all directions, neighbors, evidence, timelines, and the unshakable sense that this had been a crime orchestrated from the inside out. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet again, but the ordinary street felt irrevocably altered. The house, the shed, the porch, every corner held a memory of what had been concealed, of lies that had stretched too thin, finally unraveling. In the interrogation room, he sat back, hands still restrained, shoulders slumping, staring at the stark wall before him. The legal machinery moved forward, inexorable and precise. Every detail, the concealed shed, the timeline, the informal confessions, now fed into a case built on undeniable evidence. The crime, once shrouded in mystery and silent terror, was now defined, framed, and codified, possession turned deadly, control exercised with lethal finality. The arrest was complete. The charges were clear. And the narrative, once fractured by disappearance and deceit, had solidified into the dark truth. The courtroom was tense, every corner steeped in an almost unbearable quiet. The gallery was filled with muted whispers, the occasional shuffle of papers breaking the stillness. At the front, a white male in his mid-30s, pale skin, short dark hair, slight stubble, medium build, wearing a dark suit over a restrained demeanor, sat handcuffed, flanked by two uniformed officers. His posture was rigid, shoulders tight, jaw set, eyes downcast, the weight of inevitability pressing on him. He was the center of the room, the man whose actions had shattered lives, now facing the stark reality of legal consequence. Across from him, the prosecutor, a white female in her early 40s, medium build, shoulder-length brown hair, wearing a tailored blazer and blouse, standing tall with a precise and commanding presence, addressed the court. Her voice was steady, every word deliberate, outlining the sequence of events, the concealed shed, the confession to a trusted friend, the mounting evidence, and the charges of aggravated murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. She paused occasionally, letting the gravity of the facts sink in. There was no dispute, no ambiguity. The truth had been meticulously compiled and corroborated, it was overwhelming, irrefutable. The defense attorney, a middle-aged white male, balding with thin glasses, medium build, wearing a dark suit, seated beside the accused, cleared his throat, giving a brief statement about cooperation and acknowledgement of guilt. Then came the plea. The accused looked up briefly, eyes shadowed and weary, lips pressed thin, before uttering in a low, steady voice, "Guilty to all charges." The courtroom seemed to exhale simultaneously, the tension easing slightly but replaced by the weight of certainty. There would be no trial, no jury deliberation. The facts were now undeniable. The judge, a stern white female in her late 50s, gray hair pulled back, wearing traditional judicial robes, expression measured but firm, leaned forward from the bench. Given the plea and the evidence presented, sentencing will be formalized. She enumerated the consequences: life in prison, with eligibility for parole after 25 years. Each phrase landed heavily in the room, resonating through the gallery. The accused shifted slightly in his chair, hands clasped tightly together, the reality of a life now confined pressing down. Then came the victim impact statements. Tiffany's family rose one by one. Her mother, a white female in her late 50s, slight frame, hair graying, eyes swollen from grief, voice trembling yet fierce, spoke first. "We trusted someone. We lost everything. Our daughter, our joy, our sense of safety." Her words quivered between sorrow and rage, the room silent but for her voice. Her father, mid-60s, stocky build, short gray hair, wearing a dark suit, voice tight with anger and heartbreak, followed. "He stole her from us, and no words can return what was taken." The grief was raw, unfiltered, final. The courtroom absorbed it all, the meticulous evidence, the guilty plea, the sentencing, the human toll. Officers flanked the accused as he was led out, jaw tight, eyes lowered, posture slumped under the weight of consequence. Neighbors and spectators filed out slowly, the gravity of what had unfolded hanging over the street outside. The case, once a missing person investigation, had evolved into a murder investigation, confession, arrest, and now, legal reckoning. The ordinary house, the shed, the secrets, the confessions, all threads now woven into the immutable tapestry of justice. Life behind bars awaited, parole a distant horizon. The courtroom emptied, leaving only echoes of grief, rage, and the finality of a truth long concealed, finally exposed. The house in Liverpool Township sat quiet, the ordinary stillness of the neighborhood now a sharp contrast to the chaos that had once unfolded within its walls. The shed at the rear, once unremarkable, now carried the weight of revelation. Police tape had long been removed, but its absence did not erase the memory of the discovery, the concealed body, the truth finally unearthed. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the lawn, and the empty structure loomed like a silent witness. Tiffany's parents returned to the property one last time, not as intruders but as those seeking closure. Her mother, late 50s, slight frame, graying hair, dressed in muted formal wear, eyes red-rimmed, hands clasped loosely in front, voice breaking as she spoke, stepped forward first. "She was more than a daughter, more than a wife, more than we could ever protect," she whispered, the words swallowed by the wind. Her father, mid-60s, stocky build, short gray hair, wearing a dark suit, jaw tight, eyes hardened yet glistening, followed, looking at the shed with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "We trusted someone to keep her safe," he said, voice low, shaking slightly, "and that trust was everything we lost." Neighbors lingered quietly on their porches, exchanging murmurs, keeping distance yet unable to avert their gaze. The tragedy had rippled outward, touching everyone in subtle ways, the awareness that domestic violence can escalate silently, that private control can turn lethal. Law enforcement had emphasized the pattern, the subtle early warning signs, and how easy it is for ordinary routines to conceal extraordinary danger. Each officer involved in the case knew this story would haunt them, a cautionary tale etched into memory. Inside the courtroom and precinct, officers reflected on the trajectory that led to the arrest, the confession, and ultimately, the conviction. Each moment, the missing calls, the subtle inconsistencies, the shed, the evidence meticulously pieced together, had been a thread in the web that eventually ensnared the perpetrator. Yet outside, in the quiet streets, the impact was measured in human terms: a life erased, a family forever altered, a community reminded of vulnerability and trust. At the edge of the property, the shed stood empty. Its door, once ominously closed, now hung slightly ajar. The late afternoon light glinted off the weathered wood, emphasizing the hollow absence within. No movement, no whisper, no indication of what had occurred inside. The silence pressed in, profound and complete, heavier than any spoken word. The camera lingered on the shed, a final, silent witness to the events that had unfolded. Across the yard, the family stood together, grief etched on their faces, a mixture of sorrow, rage, and the faintest trace of relief that the truth was finally known. The ordinary structure, once overlooked, now symbolized the finality of what had been taken: trust, life, and innocence. As the wind stirred leaves along the quiet driveway, a voiceover closed the narrative, calm yet somber: she didn't disappear. She was erased by the person who knew her best. The frame lingered on the empty shed a moment longer, the weight of absence palpable. No more mystery remained, only the echo of choices, control, and violence, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide behind familiarity. The screen faded to black, leaving viewers with the unsettling truth and the stark finality of a life taken too soon.